They say the gods warned them. Flames danced across the night sky, and the great lake began to boil, as if the earth itself trembled beneath invisible footsteps. In the sacred temples of Tenochtitlan, priests stared into obsidian mirrors, searching for meaning in the shifting light. A comet, long and blazing, tore across the heavens, and the city fell into an uneasy silence. The wind carried whispers, the cries of unseen spirits. Dogs howled at the moon, and the air smelled of metal and rain. In the royal palace, Emperor Montezuma stood before the sacred fire. Its smoke coiled around him like a serpent, whispering words of warning. He raised his hand toward the heavens, but saw only darkness. Something was coming, vast, cold, and inevitable. Not an army, not a storm, but destiny itself. And as thunder rolled over the Valley of Mexico, the Aztec Empire, proud, radiant, and divine, began to feel the shadow of its own end. The omens had been spoken. The gods had turned their eyes away. At the edge of the world they knew, the sea began to speak. Fishermen saw shapes rising from the morning fog, mountains that moved, bearing white wings that caught the wind. The ocean hissed, the gulls screamed, and the people fell to their knees, for nothing human could cross the endless waters. They said the gods were returning. They said the sky itself had opened. From the eastern mist emerged the ships of Hernán Cortés, vast creaking beasts of wood and iron. Their sails glimmered like pale ghosts. Their cannon stared from black mouths that smelled of sulfur. And when the first shot thundered across the bay, the mountains echoed with fear. Men in armor stepped ashore, their skin pale, their faces hidden behind mirrors of steel. They spoke in a tongue like clashing metal, raised a wooden cross, and pressed it into the sand. Smoke from their torches curled into the wind as they knelt and kissed the ground. Messengers ran to Tenochtitlan, breathless, trembling. They spoke of riders on beasts larger than deer, of weapons that spat fire and thunder. In the palace, Montezuma listened in silence. He knew what the omens had promised, and now the prophecy had found its shape upon the sea. In the heart of Tenochtitlan, the city of mirrors and gods, Emperor Montezuma sat in silence. The messengers had returned from the coast, pale, trembling, unable to speak for hours. They told of men covered in shining shells, faces hidden behind metal masks, their voices echoing like thunder, their beasts taller than men, their weapons breathing fire. Some said they were gods. Others whispered they were demons sent to test the faith of the empire. Montezuma listened without a word. He turned his gaze toward the sacred fire, where the smoke rose in spirals, forming shapes that shifted like thoughts. In the shimmering light, he thought he saw the faces of his ancestors, warriors, kings, and priests, all staring back at him through the veil of centuries. Their eyes held a warning, but the emperor was a man torn between worlds, between the ancient gods of his people and the destiny written beyond the sea. He ordered that the strangers be welcomed, not as men, but as divine envoys. A procession was prepared. Golden banners, flowers, and songs of reverence echoed across the causeways that led into the great city. Drums rolled like thunder over the water as the canoes approached, carrying the armored figures toward the shining heart of the empire. When Cortés entered the city, even he felt the breath of something greater. Tenochtitlan rose from the lake like a vision. Temples of white stone, canals reflecting the sky, bridges lined with thousands of faces watching in silence. Gold glimmered from every corner. Incense burned in the air like fog. To the Spaniards, it was another world, older, purer, and more alive than their own. At the steps of the great temple, Montezuma waited. He stood in robes of turquoise and jade, the air around him trembling with the sound of distant drums. Cortés approached, removed his helmet, and bowed slightly, his eyes locked on the emperor, a man he had been told was a god. For a moment, neither moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. The lake was still, the sky was silent, and history itself hesitated between two men. Montezuma reached out his hand, offering gifts, gold, feathers, obsidian. Cortés accepted them with a smile that carried both gratitude and calculation. He placed a small crucifix into the emperor's palm and whispered through his translator, "There is only one God, and he sent me to you." The words passed through the air like a blade. The crowd stirred. The priest frowned. Montezuma's eyes flickered, not with anger, but with the quiet terror of understanding. He saw then that these were not gods returning home. They were men, and men can destroy what gods create. And so, beneath the golden light of a dying sun, two worlds looked upon each other. One believing it was meeting heaven, the other believing it had found a kingdom to conquer. The silence that once ruled the valley was broken. Thunder echoed across the lake, not from the sky, but from the mouths of iron. The first battle had begun. Smoke drifted through the streets of Tenochtitlan. Men in shining armor advanced behind walls of fire, their cannons spitting smoke and ash. The Aztec warriors, fierce and unyielding, charged with obsidian blades that shattered against steel. Their cries mixed with the thunder of guns, the hiss of arrows, the screams of the wounded. Temples that once sang with prayer now burned in red light. Feathers and blood filled the air. The gods were silent. The lake reflected the glow of the dying city as the sun disappeared behind clouds of dust. And through the chaos, Cortés marched forward, a man who believed he carried heaven in his hands. And Montezuma watched from the palace, realizing too late that the gods who had come from the sea were not there to bless, but to conquer. The city that once worshipped gods now burned in their name. The people had seen their temples fall, their warriors cut down by thunder and smoke. And in their hearts, something ancient awakened, not faith, but fury. The drums of war beat again. From every street and courtyard, men and women rose with stone, spears, and fire. The air trembled with the sound of revolt. They no longer saw gods in the pale strangers, only men fragile beneath the metal, the same men who had betrayed their trust, who had taken their emperor hostage within his own palace walls. Montezuma stood upon the balcony, wearing the crown of jade, his eyes hollow with disbelief. He raised his hands to calm the crowd, but the voices below roared too loud. Stones rained through the air. One struck the emperor's head and he fell, silent and still. Outside, chaos consumed the city. The bridges ran red, the temples cracked, and the canals filled with bodies and ashes. The Spaniards fought to escape, their armor sinking into the mud of blood and rain. And above it all, the sky darkened, as if even the sun refused to witness what man had done in the name of his God. The empire bled from 1,000 wounds. Tenochtitlan, the city once shining like a jewel upon the lake, now drowned in fire and ash. The temples crumbled. The streets ran red, and the smell of smoke replaced the scent of flowers that once drifted through its gardens. The warriors fought until their blades broke, until their bodies fell upon the sacred stones. Mothers carried their children through the flooded alleys, whispering prayers to gods who no longer answer. The great lake turned dark, reflecting only the flames. It was no longer a battle. It was an ending written in silence. Cortés watched from the ruins, his face lit by the burning city. Around him, his men cheered, but their voices faded into the night. He had conquered the empire, yet in his heart he felt no triumph, only the heavy echo of something irreversibly lost. In the final hours, the last drum stopped beating. The idols were pulled down, their faces broken, their names forgotten. The wind carried the ashes of the temples over the lake, where they fell like black snow. And as dawn rose over the smoke-filled valley, the Aztec Empire, proud, sacred, and eternal, ceased to exist. Silence returned to the valley. Where the cries of men once echoed, now only the wind spoke, low and endless. The temples lay in ruins, half buried in ash and stone. The canals were still covered with floating petals and dust. The empire was gone, but a shadow remained, carved into the earth, written into the sky. Years passed and the jungle began to breathe again. Roots crawled over fallen walls, vines wrapped around broken idols, birds built nests in the mouths of forgotten gods. Rain fell softly upon the steps of what had once been the great temple, washing away blood, memory, and time. No one came to pray. No drums, no chants, no smoke rising to the heavens. Only the voice of nature, patient, eternal, reclaiming what man once called divine. And beneath the soil, deep where the light no longer reached, the stones still whispered the names of those who built them, names the world would never speak again. Centuries have passed since the fall of Tenochtitlan. The fires are gone, the gods are silent, yet their echoes remain, carried in the wind that still drifts over the valley. Beneath the streets of modern Mexico City lie the bones of an empire, and every stone that rises upward rests upon the dust of its own ancestors. The temples are gone, but the rhythm of the drums lives on, in festivals, in songs, in the pulse of a people who remember without knowing. The faces have changed, the language evolved, yet in their eyes still burns the same light that once reflected the sacred fire. The conquerors built churches where the pyramids once stood, but even in those walls, the old gods breathe, unseen, patient, waiting. Every step through the ancient ruins is a conversation with ghosts. The stones whisper of courage and loss, of kings and slaves, of gods who refuse to die. And when the rain falls over the valley, it carries the memory of blood and prayer, mingled forever in the soil. Empires fall, faiths fade, but spirit endures. The Aztec Empire is no more, yet its heart still beats beneath the earth, in the music, in the stories, in the silence between generations. For nothing built in faith is ever truly lost. It simply changes shape and waits to be remembered.